The weight of measured fire. The Browning automatic rifle weighs 20 pounds, but in the grey dawn light of the Vosges Mountains, it feels heavier than the future itself. Audie Murphy shifts the weapon against his shoulder as he watches the 3rd Infantry Division's morning routine unfold around him. Men emerging from snow-covered foxholes like ghosts, their breath forming small clouds in the January cold that hangs over eastern France like a funeral shroud. Sergeant Williams passes along the tree line, checking positions with the methodical care of a man who has learned that survival depends on details. The Germans have been probing their sector for 3 days, sending small patrols through the pine forests that crown these ridges, testing the American lines with the patience of experienced hunters. Intelligence reports suggest something larger building, armor movements in the valleys below, radio chatter indicating a possible push to retake the high ground that has cost both sides so much blood. Murphy runs his thumb along the bar's receiver, counting the scratches and dents that tell the story of Sicily, Italy, and now these frozen mountains. Each mark represents a firefight where the weapon's 20 rounds per magazine made the difference between his squad walking away or becoming statistics in some distant headquarters casualty reports. But today feels different, carrying the weight of unfinished business and the kind of tension that makes experienced soldiers check their ammunition twice. The radio crackles from the command post dug into the hillside behind them. Lieutenant Morrison's voice carries the exhaustion of too many night alerts and too many positions that had to be held with too few men. The company has been spread thin along this sector of the Vosges, defending approaches that doctrine suggests require twice their current strength. But doctrine, Murphy has learned, rarely accounts for French mountain weather or the way fear moves through a rifle company like winter wind. Private Jensen approaches through the trees, his movements careful to avoid the patches of snow that might betray his position to German observers in the valley. At 19, Jensen carries himself with the false confidence of someone who has survived his first month of combat and believes he understands the rules. Murphy remembers that feeling, the dangerous certainty that courage and training would be enough before the war taught him that survival often depends on mathematics he never learned in school. Sergeant says, "We might be pulling back to secondary positions," Jensen whispers, his words forming small clouds in the cold air. Word from battalion is that Jerry's massing armor down in the valley, maybe a full regiment. Murphy nods without taking his eyes off the approaches below. The secondary positions Jensen mentions are trenches carved into the reverse slope, offering better protection but abandoning the observation points that allow them to call artillery on German movements. It's the kind of tactical retreat that makes sense on paper, but feels like surrender to men who have measured their progress through these mountains in yards and casualties. The morning stand-to continues with practiced efficiency, weapons cleaned, ammunition distributed, fields of fire checked against the changing light. But Murphy notices the small signs that suggest today will demand more than routine. The way Corporal Williams lingers over his rifle maintenance, the careful attention men pay to personal letters tucked inside helmet liners, the quiet conversations that stop when officers approach. Somewhere in the valley below, German engines rumble with the deep mechanical sound of tanks moving into position. The sound carries differently in winter air, seeming to come from all directions at once, making it impossible to judge distances or numbers with any certainty. Murphy adjusts his grip on the bar, feeling the familiar weight of responsibility that has nothing to do with rank and everything to do with the faces around him. The weapon that had seemed like his closest companion during the retreat from Saint-Rémy now feels like a question waiting to be answered. 20 rounds in the magazine, spare ammunition distributed among the squad, and the growing certainty that whatever comes next will test every lesson he has learned about measured fire, tactical patience, and the precise application of violence in defense of men who trust him to make the right choices. In the distance, artillery begins to whisper through the morning air. If stories like this make you imagine what you'd do under fire, tell us in the comments how you think you'd react in this situation. And stay with us for the next chapters. The German artillery arrives with mathematical precision, each shell landing closer to their positions with the methodical adjustment of experienced gunners. Murphy presses himself against the frozen earth of his foxhole, feeling the bar's weight shift as concussion waves roll through the pine trees above. The Vosges Mountains seem to amplify the explosions, sending echoes bouncing between ridges until the air itself becomes a percussion instrument played by distant enemies. Between salvos, he can hear Lieutenant Morrison's voice from the command post, shouting coordinates into the radio handset that connects their isolated company to the artillery batteries positioned miles behind the lines. But Murphy knows the mathematics of indirect fire. Their own guns will need time to range in on German positions, time measured in minutes that might as well be hours when tanks are moving through valley approaches. Jensen slides into the foxhole beside him, his face pale with something beyond cold. The young private carries a message pouch from company headquarters, the kind of canvas bag that usually contains either routine administrative updates or news that changes everything. Murphy takes the pouch without comment, recognizing the weight that has nothing to do with paper and ink. The message, written in Lieutenant Morrison's careful handwriting, confirms what the artillery barrage had already suggested. German reconnaissance has identified their positions with uncomfortable accuracy. Tank commanders are moving armor up the valley roads, supported by infantry that knows these mountains as well as the Americans who have been fighting for them since October. The 3rd Infantry Division sector, already stretched beyond comfortable limits, will soon face pressure that requires immediate decisions about which ground can be held and which must be abandoned. Secondary positions, Murphy reads aloud, his breath forming small clouds as German shells continue to bracket their ridgeline. Fall back on my signal, maintain contact, prepare for extended defensive operations. The words carry the clinical precision of military doctrine, but Murphy understands the translation. They will retreat to positions that offer less observation and fewer opportunities for the kind of measured fire that has kept his squad alive through months of mountain warfare. The bar, so effective when used from carefully selected firing positions, will become just another rifle in trenches designed for survival rather than tactical advantage. Corporal Williams appears at the edge of their position, moving with the low crouch that experienced soldiers develop when artillery is falling with uncomfortable accuracy. His face carries the expression of a man who has read the same tactical situation and reached similar conclusions about their immediate prospects. Behind him, the rest of the squad prepares for movement with the efficient haste of men who have learned to pack their lives into what they can carry on their backs. "How long do we hold here?" Williams asks, his question directed at the message pouch rather than Murphy himself. Before Murphy can answer, the character of the artillery changes. Instead of the ranging shots that had been probing their positions, the shells begin falling in sustained patterns designed to isolate their sector from supporting units. Communication lines to adjacent companies disappear under high explosive. The radio in the command post goes silent, except for static, punctuated by distant voices speaking in German. Through the pine trees, Murphy can see movement in the valley below, dark shapes that might be tanks, infantry advancing in tactical bounds, the coordination of forces that suggests this is more than a probe. The measured fire techniques that had worked so well during the Saint-Remy withdrawal depend on clear fields of fire and predictable enemy movement patterns. What approaches through the morning mist looks like neither. He checks the bar's magazine for the 3rd time in 10 minutes, counting rounds that he already knows by heart. 20 rounds loaded, 6 spare magazines distributed between his gear and Jensen's pack, enough ammunition for perhaps 15 minutes of sustained fire if the advancing Germans cooperate by presenting clear targets at reasonable ranges. The mathematics feel inadequate for what the morning seems to promise. The artillery stops with sudden finality that makes the silence feel heavier than the explosions. In that quiet, Murphy can hear tank engines growing louder, the metallic sound of track links grinding against stone, and underneath it all, the voices of men moving through forest, approaches with tactical discipline, the kind of sounds that mean the theoretical retreat described in Lieutenant Morrison's message is about to become an immediate requirement for survival. Jensen checks his rifle with movements made clumsy by cold and adrenaline. Williams studies the approaches with binoculars that fog with each breath. And Murphy feels the bar's weight shift as he prepares for whatever version of measured fire the next hour will require. The German voices carry through the pine trees with surprising clarity, their conversation casual enough to suggest confidence in what they're about to attempt. Murphy listens to the foreign words while studying the approaches below, trying to calculate timing and distances that will determine whether his squad walks away from this ridge or becomes another entry in the 3rd Infantry Division's casualty reports. The Vosges Mountains, beautiful in their winter silence, have become a tactical problem measured in yards of snow-covered ground and the effective range of automatic weapons. Lieutenant Morrison appears at Murphy's position, moving with the careful haste of an officer who has just received orders that complicate an already difficult situation. His face carries the expression of someone translating between what higher command expects and what the ground actually allows. Behind him, Sergeant Williams follows with the radio handset, its antenna barely visible through the pine branches that provide their only concealment. "Battalion wants us to hold for another 30 minutes, Morrison says, his voice carrying the kind of certainty that doesn't quite reach his eyes. Division artillery is shifting fire missions to support our withdrawal, but they need time to coordinate with adjacent units." Murphy nods while performing mental calculations that have nothing to do with official timelines. 30 minutes means at least 2 German probing attacks, possibly 3 if their commanders are cautious. The BR carries enough ammunition for perhaps half that time if he maintains the kind of measured fire that had worked during the Saint-Rémy action. But the approaches to this ridge offer different tactical problems. Closer ranges, multiple avenues of attack, and terrain that favors movement over defensive fire. Jensen shifts position beside him, the young private's nervous energy creating small sounds that seem amplified in the winter air. His rifle, cleaned and loaded with the careful attention of someone who has learned that details matter, catches morning light that filters through pine branches heavy with snow. But Murphy can see the uncertainty in Jensen's movements, the way his hands check equipment that he already knows is properly prepared. "How many do you figure?" Williams asks, nodding toward the sounds below. "Company strength, maybe more," Murphy replies, listening to the rhythm of voices and movement that suggests tactical organization. "Armor support. Probably those tanks we've been hearing." The mathematics feel uncomfortable. His squad controls 8 rifles and the bar, with ammunition for extended fire but not indefinite resistance. German company strength means 3 times their numbers, supported by weapons that outrange everything the Americans can bring to bear. The kind of tactical problem that doctrine suggests should be solved by withdrawal to better positions, not by attempting to hold ground that cannot be held. But the 30-minute timeline creates its own problems. Withdrawal under direct fire requires covering movements that depend on someone staying behind to suppress German advances. The bar, with its measured fire capability, becomes the obvious choice for rearguard action, which means Murphy will watch his squad move to safety while he remains in position to buy time they need to reach the secondary positions. Radio chatter from the command post provides fragments of information about the larger tactical situation. Other companies in the division sector are reporting similar pressure. German armor movements suggest coordinated attacks designed to push American forces off the high ground they have held since the October offensive. The kind of operation that makes individual squad actions feel both crucial and insignificant simultaneously. Murphy adjusts the bar's position, checking fields of fire that will determine how long he can maintain effective suppression of German advances. The weapon that had felt heavy during morning's stand to now seems almost inadequate for what the tactical situation demands. 20 rounds per magazine, carefully applied with the precision he has learned through months of combat, against company-strength attacks supported by armor and indirect fire. Jensen looks at him with the expression of someone who has begun to understand what measured fire means in tactical terms, not just accurate shooting, but the deliberate acceptance of mathematical disadvantages in service of larger objectives. The kind of decision that gets written up in after-action reports as heroic, but feels like simple arithmetic when you're holding the weapon that makes it possible. Through the trees below, the first German scouts become visible. Would you follow the orders exactly, or trust what your own eyes and instincts tell you in a moment like this? Comment which path you'd take, and share this episode with someone who loves real human stories from history. The first German soldier appears at the tree line, 300 yards below, moving with the careful precision of someone who knows American positions are somewhere ahead, but hasn't located them with certainty. Murphy watches through the bar's sights as more figures emerge from the pine forest, their winter camouflage effective but not perfect against the snow-covered approaches to the ridge. The tactical mathematics become clear. A full German company advancing in coordinated bounds, supported by what sounds like armor moving up the valley road behind them. Lieutenant Morrison's withdrawal signal comes exactly when the tactical situation makes compliance impossible. Murphy can see his squad preparing to move toward the secondary positions, but German advance elements have closed the distance enough to make movement under fire a guarantee rather than a risk. The BR, positioned to cover the most likely approaches, becomes the key to whether 8 American soldiers reach safety or become casualties in a retreat that tactical doctrine says should have begun 10 minutes earlier. Jensen hesitates at the edge of the foxhole, his young face showing the conflict between orders that say move and reality that says wait. Murphy makes the decision with mathematics that have nothing to do with heroism and everything to do with the effective range of automatic weapons. The measured fire techniques that had worked during the Saint-Rémy action require someone to stay behind and apply them with precision that buys time measured in minutes and lives. Go, Murphy says, his voice carrying the kind of certainty that makes orders out of suggestions. I'll catch up when you reach the secondary line. But they both understand the tactical reality. The bar's effective suppression of German advances depends on maintaining position until targets present themselves at ranges where 20-round magazines make tactical sense, which means Murphy will hold the ridge alone while his squad moves to safety, using measured fire to create windows of opportunity that exist only as long as he can maintain accurate shooting under direct fire. The German advance continues with textbook precision, small groups moving forward while others provide covering fire. Murphy watches their tactical discipline through the bar's sights, recognizing professional soldiers who understand mountain warfare and have planned this attack with uncomfortable thoroughness, the kind of enemy that requires every round to count and every burst to achieve specific tactical objectives rather than simple suppression. His first measured burst, 5 rounds, catches a German squad leader as they attempt to bound forward across open ground. The brief suppression allows Williams and Jensen to reach better cover 50 yards back along the ridgeline. Murphy shifts position immediately, understanding that German return fire will concentrate on his muzzle flash within seconds. The pine trees that provide concealment also limit his movement options, creating the kind of tactical puzzle that gets solved with timing and mathematics rather than firepower. The bar's weight feels different now, no longer heavy, but precisely balanced for the kind of shooting that measures success in tactical minutes rather than enemy casualties. Murphy fires again, 7 rounds at German positions that threaten his squad's withdrawal route. The brief silence allows 2 more soldiers to bound back toward the secondary positions. But German return fire is increasing, rifle rounds and machine gun bursts that bracket his position with uncomfortable accuracy. Through the tactical chaos, Murphy begins to understand something about measured fire that training had never explained. It's not about conserving ammunition or achieving precise target effects. It's about accepting mathematical certainty that someone has to stay behind and apply violence with surgical precision while others reach safety. The BR becomes an instrument for converting individual exposure to enemy fire into collective survival for men who trust him to make those calculations correctly. The German armor arrives with mechanical precision, tanks moving up the valley road to support infantry already committed to the assault. Murphy can hear track links grinding against stone, diesel engines laboring in winter air, and radio chatter that suggests German commanders are coordinating fires on American positions with professional thoroughness. The kind of support that changes tactical mathematics from difficult to impossible. But his squad has reached the tree line that leads to secondary positions, and Murphy prepares for the most precise application of measured fire his experience has taught him. The bar, loaded with his final full magazine, becomes the tool for solving equations that have only one correct answer. The secret that no after-action report will ever capture begins with the sound of Murphy's breathing in the sudden quiet after his squad disappears into the tree line. The bar rests against his shoulder, loaded with 20 rounds that represent the mathematical difference between tactical withdrawal and catastrophic failure. Below him, German soldiers advance with the confidence of professionals who believe they're attacking a position already abandoned by retreating Americans. But Murphy has discovered something about measured fire that transforms terror into precision. As German infantry moves across open ground toward his position, he realizes that staying behind wasn't heroic. It was the only tactical solution that allowed 8 men to reach safety. The weight of that mathematics settles into his hands as he prepares to apply violence with surgical timing that will buy precious minutes for soldiers who have already disappeared from his sight. His first burst, 8 rounds, catches the German advance guard as they cross the clearing below his position. But instead of suppressing enemy movement, Murphy's fire draws concentrated return fire that transforms his foxhole into the focal point of a company-strength attack. Rifle rounds and machine gun fire bracket his position with accuracy that suggests German marksmen have located him with uncomfortable precision. The tactical reality becomes clear. Murphy cannot withdraw without exposing himself to direct fire across open ground that German machine guns now cover with overlapping fields of fire. The bar, designed for mobile support of infantry advances, becomes a defensive weapon that can suppress enemy movement but cannot create the windows of opportunity that would allow its operator to reach safety. He is mathematically trapped by the success of his own covering fire. What happens next exists in the gap between official reports and private memory. Murphy continues measured fire not because tactical doctrine requires it, but because German soldiers keep presenting targets at ranges where individual rifle rounds can prevent organized assault on American secondary positions. Each burst from the bar serves tactical objectives that extend beyond his immediate survival to include men whose safety depends on continued suppression of enemy advances. The German commander, recognizing that American resistance centers on a single automatic weapon, concentrates fire on Murphy's position with methodical precision. Artillery begins falling on the ridgeline with accuracy that suggests forward observers have identified his location exactly. Mortar rounds walk closer to his foxhole with each adjustment. But Murphy continues firing because the alternative, allowing German infantry to organize for assault on secondary positions, means casualties among men who trust him to apply measured fire with mathematical precision. Between German artillery salvos, Murphy can hear radio chatter from his own command post, Lieutenant Morrison's voice calling for immediate artillery support on German positions. But indirect fire takes time to coordinate an accuracy that depends on observation posts that may no longer exist. Which means Murphy will continue applying direct fire with the bar until either German advances stop or his ammunition runs out. The weapon that had seemed heavy during morning stand-to now feels like the precise tool for solving tactical problems that have no other solution. Murphy fires his final measured bursts, not with heroic intention, but with mathematical certainty. Each round applied to specific targets at ranges where suppression creates tactical windows that his squad can exploit to maintain defensive positions. When German fire finally slackens, Murphy prepares for withdrawal with movements that feel automatic rather than courageous. The BR, now carrying only partial magazines, has served its tactical purpose. His squad has reached safety. The ridgeline, no longer tenable as a defensive position, can be abandoned according to doctrine that makes tactical sense when applied with timing that measures success in American soldiers who reach secondary positions alive. But Murphy carries with him the mathematical certainty that measured fire means accepting individual exposure to enemy action in service of collective survival. The kind of calculation that gets written up as heroism, but feels like arithmetic when you're holding the weapon that makes such mathematics possible. The secondary positions occupy a reverse slope that offers protection from German direct fire, but eliminates the observation points that made measured fire tactically effective. Murphy reaches the tree line 20 minutes after his squad, the bar feeling lighter now that its primary tactical purpose has been achieved. Jensen and Williams wait for him with expressions that combine relief with something approaching awe, the look of soldiers who have watched someone apply violence with precision that saved their lives. Lieutenant Morrison appears from the command post with radio messages that transform Murphy's individual action into military terminology. Words like exceptional valor and suppression of enemy advances reduce the tactical mathematics of measured fire to phrases suitable for official reports. But Murphy understands the gap between administrative language and the private memory of calculating how long 20 rounds could suppress company strength attacks supported by armor. Division wants a full report, Morrison says, his voice carrying the exhaustion of an officer who has spent the morning coordinating withdrawals under fire. Higher command needs details about German strength and tactics for intelligence evaluation. The report, dictated in the relative safety of positions carved into frozen earth, converts Murphy's experience into information useful for tactical planning. German company strength, armor support, coordination between infantry and indirect fire, details that help division staff understand enemy capabilities and plan appropriate responses. But the mathematics of individual exposure to enemy fire disappears into clinical descriptions of effective suppression and successful withdrawal under pressure. Jensen sits beside Murphy as evening approaches, cleaning his rifle with movements that have become more precise since watching measured fire applied under conditions that should have made tactical success impossible. The young private's questions come carefully, probing for understanding of decisions that training had never addressed directly. How do you calculate when to stay behind? How do you measure acceptable risk against certain necessity? Murphy's answers come slowly, filtered through exhaustion that has more to do with mathematical certainty than physical effort. The BR, propped against the trench wall, represents not heroism, but the precise application of tactical knowledge to problems that have only one correct solution. Sometimes measured fire means accepting individual exposure to enemy action because the alternative means collective failure for men whose safety depends on continued suppression of enemy advances. Radio chatter from division headquarters provides updates on the larger tactical situation. German attacks across the Vosges Mountains sector have been contained, American forces have maintained defensive positions, and casualty reports remain within acceptable limits for operations of this scope. The kind of administrative summary that transforms individual actions into statistical success, measured in ground held and objectives achieved rather than personal experience. But late that night, when artillery has stopped and radio nets have gone quiet, Murphy sits in a foxhole carved from frozen earth and listens to winter wind move through pine trees heavy with snow. The bar rests across his knees, cleaned and loaded for whatever tomorrow's tactical situation might require. Yet his hands shake slightly as he performs routine maintenance, not from cold or fatigue, but from the mathematical certainty that measured fire will be required again. Williams approaches through the darkness, carrying coffee that tastes like survival and companionship rather than actual sustenance. His presence provides the kind of comfort that doesn't require conversation. Acknowledgement between soldiers who have shared tactical mathematics that get written up as heroism, but feel like arithmetic when you're calculating how 20 rounds can suppress company strength attacks. Years later, when the war becomes history and individual actions become citations suitable for display cases, Murphy will remember not the official language, but the weight of the bar in winter air, the sound of German voices through pine trees, and the mathematical precision required to convert individual exposure into collective survival. The kind of measured fire that gets recorded as exceptional valor but lives in memory as simple certainty. That sometimes courage means staying behind with automatic weapons while others reach safety, applying violence with surgical precision until the tactical problem is solved. If this story reminded you that behind every medal there's a human being carrying memories we'll never fully see, subscribe to the channel, tell us which country you watch from, and invite someone to revisit history with us in the next story.